Hey everyone, my guest today is Dawn Porter. Dawn is an acclaimed documentary filmmaker known for her storytelling on social justice, history, and cultural icons. Her celebrated documentaries include Trapped, John Lewis, Good Trouble, The Ladybird Diaries, Luther, Never Too Much, The Sing Sing Chronicles, and more. Dawn has won many awards for her work, including the Emmy for Best Documentary, the Sundance Special Jury Prize, the Peabody Award, the NAACP Image Award, the Critics' Choice Impact Award, and the National Humanities Medal by former President Joe Biden, just to name a few. I am so honored to have the glorious talent that is Dawn Porter on the podcast today. Welcome. How are you today?
I am doing really well, and I want to thank my mother for sending that introduction for you to read. But no, seriously, it's such a pleasure to be with you. Big fan of what you're doing, and I appreciate you having me.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, tell your mom she was being very humble in that case because, Dawn, this is such a truncated version of what I could have read because your life has had so many incredible chapters, all of them somehow landing on you making the world a better place in your own way. I want to go back, as I often do with guests, because we could really spend hours on every one of those projects I mentioned. And that's really just like, a thumbnail sketch of the things that you've done. If you don't mind, speaking of your mom, if you're comfortable, I love going back to sort of where did you grow up, who was in the house with you, and sort of early influences, because you are such the definition of activist. So can you just tell us a little bit about your own personal history before we get really into the professional side?
I would love to do that. I am a legitimate native New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn. When I was young, we lived in the Bronx, and then we moved to the suburbs of New York City. My father was a professional photographer, and so as a young child, spent a fair amount of time in his studio. He had this studio on the far east side, and if you know New York City, um, over by the East River, there are these old carriage houses, and so there's cobblestone floor and kind of the frosted glass and the large windows. And what I remember most about that was the light that would come in to the carriage house. And it was a great place for a photographer. So, like, the smell of developing chemicals, like, really is a very strong memory. My mother is also a native New Yorker. Her family um, she was raised in Harlem. Her father was a doctor in Harlem. Her mother was stay-at-home mother. Um, her great, her grandfather, my great grandfather, is a man named Ben Robeson. And Ben Robeson is the brother of Paul Robeson, the activist, artist. And so I grew up hearing stories about Uncle Paul, is how my family refers to him. And I will say that that made a very big impact on me, hearing of this person who, and most people don't know, Paul Robeson was a lawyer. He was a gifted athlete, went to Rutgers, lived in Princeton. My mother's family's lived in Princeton, New Jersey. But my great grandfather would host Uncle Paul at church because he was the pastor of a very large church. And particularly during the McCarthy era, when they were trying to take his passport, and they did take his passport for his civil rights activity, he always returned to that church and would speak to the congregation. He would always do, concerts to raise money for the church. So the stories about activism and about showing up, about witnessing, I think that coupled with my father showing how you could capture beauty and truth as a photographer, I think those things were in the ether of my childhood. And then, you started with my mom, and what I will say about my mother is there's no more generous person. As a child, I didn't always love it. She was always inviting someone to stay with us, or
Right.
giving somebody a ride, or doing things for people. Um, but my mother, she didn't work when I was very young. She was very clear about making sure that I went to a good school. Um, she she like would sew, like she made us smocked dresses. And I don't know why that's such a clear memory. I just have a memory of being in her presence. Um, and I can definitely remember being as a child, and one of my friends saying, kids are saying, "Are you rich?" And my mother said, "I am wealthy. I have healthy children, and people I love." And she wasn't kidding. Like, that's how she has always approached her life. And then she went on to do philanthropy. She worked for the Fannie Mae Foundation, and she was a grants officer. Her job was to go around and find community organizations and give them micro grants to do good work. So I think all of those things together, those are people modeling how to show up in your community.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, just to harp on the Paul Robeson of it all for a second, I mean, most people, at least in my world, you say his name and immediately you think of Othello, that like very famous production that garnered him tremendous respect as an actor. I think it is lost on people, or maybe, so much time has passed, they may not even remember that he was starring in a show he probably would not have been able to attend as an audience member when we look back at the history of this country. And so, what a remarkable thing to try to hold those two thoughts at the same time, that someone could be this truly like unbelievable artist and yet not have all the rights of the audience members. And so I wonder if you have started to think about, or if there is seeds of a documentary about him, because everything you've just described about him isn't always in the headline about who he was historically.
The Robeson legacy is so long, and um it's almost unbelievable, the things that not only Paul but all of his siblings accomplished. Uh,
Wow.
their father was kind of run out of Princeton, New Jersey, because he refused to have his congregation sit in the back. And so he was dismissed from his church because he refused to be segregated, and that's how they end up in Harlem. And so that's
Huh.
their father.
Yeah.
And then, Paul integrates so many things. And when you say that, it is certainly the case that Black people could not attend the performance of Othello. And that includes my grandmother, who was one of his favorite nieces. And when he was
Right.
on Broadway, my grandmother got married, and he asked her to wait in her wedding dress until after the performance so that he could come see her, because she couldn't come see him. Um, but the other thing that people don't know is Paul met with artists like Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, and artists to talk about support for civil rights. And they did that in my grandmother's apartment in Harlem in the Riverton, because it wasn't bugged. And they knew that his phone was. And my mother was trained as a little girl to wait for a click to make sure that nobody was listening on the conversations. So, what they all experienced and how they persevered and thrived, that's something I'm really proud of.
Right.
And I do think about it. So yeah, I would love to do that film. And I know that there have been some efforts to do some things, so we'll see.
Okay, well that I'm working on it as we speak. I'm texting under the desk so that we can make that happen. Your list of extraordinary people that you have focused your attention on as a director and a producer and an artist with your company, um, it's it's really remarkable to try. I mean, to put a thread of like all like John Lewis and Pete Souza and Kennedy and Luther Vandross. I mean, there's politics, there's activists, there's artists, there's and Sing Sing like and focusing on unjustly accused people serving unbelievably long sentences, sometimes life sentences for crimes they didn't commit. You have put your heart and soul and time into these stories. And I know just as a human who loves documentaries, you have to, I mean, this is a marriage between you and subject that goes on. I mean, sometimes it can be a decade or more working on material. So as you went from, well, we buried the lead. Dawn was also an attorney, a litigator, before you segued into like, how do I take my legal acumen and degree and journalism and entertainment and merge it? So before I get ahead of myself to like how you choose who to marry artistically in these ways, how did you make the leap from litigator, like Paul and others who came before you, to journalist to filmmaker?
I never planned to be a filmmaker. That was not in my, goals for myself. I really always wanted to be a lawyer, and I was actually quite happy being a lawyer. And when I worked for a law firm, Baker Hostetler in Washington, D.C. I had really good mentors. I had a good experience. My best friend at the law firm, young woman in her 30s, passed away from ovarian cancer. And it was such a shocking thing for me as a young person. I didn't know anyone on or near my age who passed away. And there's this Red Hot Chili Pepper song, "This life is not a run through." And like that phrase, just, I was like, this is it. Is this all you want your life to be? Is like being happy enough? Is that enough? Are you doing enough for people? So my I was brand new married. My husband and I talked about it and we agreed. We were both young lawyers. Whoever got their dream job first, that's where we would go. And so I got an offer to move to New York City and work for ABC Television, which then became working for ABC News. And so we came to New York. And so over the years, I was at ABC almost 8 years. And in that time, I saw journalists take something really complicated and make it comprehensible. And I saw Peter Jennings run a newsroom and, whatever flaws he had personally, he was an outstanding journalist and would always challenge the people who worked for him. I was an underling. I wasn't being challenged by Peter Jennings. I was happy to be in the room
Yeah,
and
yeah,
hear
yeah.
him challenge his staff.
Right.
And so, I saw kind of how journalism is done really well. And at that time, it was done really well. And at some point, I thought, I'm seeing a lot of stories about people who look like me, Black people. I'm not seeing them by Black people. And I thought, wait a minute, I think I could do this. And litigation, being a trial lawyer and I'm not a trial lawyer, but being a litigator, trial lawyers are in court every single day. Those are
Right.
I'm making. But, I did have jury trials, few. But I took a lot of depositions. And what you do there is you listen to people. You're listening for the story. So I thought the skill I have, I was a decent photographer. I think I have a decent eye, and I'm a good listener. And seeing what producers and directors do, I'm like, that's what they're doing. And then I had managerial skills from working in a law firm. So that's what I brought. And then I think the thing that people don't focus on, which is probably the most important thing, and is actually what I learned from President Obama, is empathy, is
Mm.
actually really caring about what people are telling you, not imposing your desired story, but actually listening to theirs. And that's why I think my films do have a big range, and I do that intentionally. But the core is telling the story people are trying to express and finding the truth as far as we can tell it. So, I worked for ABC, and then I went to A&E, and then I had a good friend who was working for the Ford Foundation, and I pitched her this history film, and she said, we don't really fund that, but are you interested in any of our grantees? And I'm a lawyer. I was really interested in the public defenders. My husband had done the criminal justice clinic, which is defense for poor people. And I started following them. And the first time I met those young lawyers, I mean, my heart just exploded open. And I thought, I think I can help non-lawyers understand what these young people are doing,
Like what a public defender is.
what a
Yeah,
public
what
defender
they really
is
do day to
real.
day. Yeah.
That's right. And so that became the first film. And then, you know, as far as film goes, I understand I have the Cinderella story. HBO bought it, it premiered at Sundance, and we won the Best Editing Award.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I know now you have a company, it's called
Trilogy Films.
Trilogy Films. At the time when it's one thing, I'm like, you should do, a Paul Robeson doc, right? There's the idea. And then there's like the countless steps between conceiving the project and then the doing of it. So in that case, you didn't have an umbrella you didn't have your own production company, right? You're
Yeah,
sort of a gun for hire for this thing. Like, how did that, first of all, you talked about the clinic that your husband had been a part of. How did you sort of handpick the characters, the main characters for your story? How did that sort of unfold? And just remind listeners what the title of the project was.
sure. So that film is a film called Gideon's Army. It's about three young public defenders from the South. They were in their first jobs out of law school. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know anything about public defenders. I was
Right,
like most people. Um, and so I, I didn't even understand why they would take jobs where they would represent people who had committed crimes. And when I think about that now, I'm like ashamed. The Sixth Amendment to the Constitution. It's the only job written in the Constitution. You have the
right,
right to an attorney. You have the
right,
right to a fair trial.
right.
And who is representing the people who are accused? It's
Yeah,
largely public defenders.
yeah,
So there are some not good ones, and then there are some ones who are trying to be great, and then
yeah,
there's some who are. And so I thought, we know about the poor ones, let's see if we could understand the challenges for the good ones. So even making that movie, even like, I didn't say like, oh, I'm a director now. I said I'm telling this particular story. um Following that story, I had another one, and so I started pitching that. And then that was called Spies of Mississippi. And it's this story about African American spies who were recruited by the white supremacists in Mississippi to spy on the NAACP. I'm like, you can't make that up. But like, if I told you that, you're like, Black people were spying, and those
right,
spies were quite effective.
right.
One of them, his name was Agent X, and he infiltrated the training program in Ohio. The three civil rights workers who were murdered, he gave their names to the Mississippi police who were infiltrated by the Klan, and then they killed them. They didn't find them randomly. They were given their names by a Black spy. So doing those two films while I was doing the Mississippi film, I read that there was only one abortion clinic in the state of Mississippi. And I just called up and said, hi, can I come over?
Yeah,
Interested in how you're staying open.
yeah.
And they mercifully said yes. And that became my third film, which also went to Sundance and also won a prize.
That's Trapped, right?
That is called Trapped. And it
Yeah,
follows this Black formerly evangelical OBGYN who would travel from Chicago to the South to perform abortions. And because there were no doctors there, there's a thread there. The people who were most suffering in Mississippi are Black and brown women, and no one was talking about that.
Right.
And so there's a playbook there as well. If you start taking away the rights of people that people don't focus on, there's a playbook that's built. The Republican administrations crafted the laws that would, take away abortion care across the South. And once those laws started steamrolling, those are the laws that went to the Supreme Court that
Right.
ultimately overturned Roe v. Wade. But it
Right. Correct.
started with poor women
Right.
taking away their access to reproductive health care. That's where it started. And that is the playbook that we see over and over. So, anyone who cares about their rights, look at what people are doing to poor people. We start deporting people now, and now we're shooting people, unarmed white women. Like nobody's safe from discrimination and oppression.
What's really incredible to me about the sort of scope of the work you've done, and I want to focus for a minute on the Luther Vandross documentary because I got to watch it last night. Um, many of the previous things you've done, the subjects were often alive as you told their story. And what is so mind-blowing to me about your Luther doc, I think it came out 2 years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't even know what day it is.
Sundance 2 years ago, and then
Yes.
yeah, it was last.
Okay, on a streamer in your home last year. There is something about this film that you watch it and you have been able to take this person who so sadly left us way too early because of his health problems, and you feel like he is so alive and with us throughout the entire movie. Obviously, because the people who love him and know him were there to talk to you about him. There is such an incredible, like the hours and hours and hours of footage that you were able, I guess you did it through Sony,
Yeah.
Sony Music, so you had access to all this behind the scenes and footage. I mean, it is, you watch it, and my son came in and he was like, I thought, wait, is Luther Vandross alive? Because the film wasn't over yet. And I was like, no. And we were just sitting there. I don't know if I'm being articulate about what I'm trying to express, but there was a way that you didn't just share the legacy, the history, the beauty of his artistry through his own words and performances and the people who loved him, but there is something so immediate about it. And then there's like, wait, every single song you love, you're like, wait, that's Luther too? Like, what is happening right now? So I wonder if there was an intention to not make this like a history lesson, but to make it feel really alive in some way that I felt like I just lived with this man for 2 hours.
Well, I really, really, I can't even tell you how much I appreciate your reaction because that's the reaction I have. Like, I feel like I know Luther. And one of the things, when I presented my idea about how to approach the film, because a lot of people had approached them before, I said, I want him to speak and him to be the voice forward. And we were so lucky to have the treasure trove of archive from Sony. And a
Yeah,
lot of that was not seen before because it was electronic press kit that was prepared for a particular set of interviews. And then it was just filed away.
right, right. It's
So
archived somewhere.
right. So it wasn't even big publicity. He was on Oprah, I think 15 times. So we and also, props and thanks to Oprah's people because we couldn't afford all that footage.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, there's a lot of Oprah. I mean, there's a lot of Mariah Carey. There's a lot of legends in your little show. Yeah.
Everyone loved him, but what I wanted to show for Luther was his process. I mean, what I think for me, another thread in the films that I make is how do people do extraordinary things? How do regular people stand up against oppression? How does a great musical genius evolve? And Luther worked at it. He certainly had some innate talent, but I wanted to show people his drive, his intentionality, his intelligence, his creativity. And you got to show people that. Like if I stood up here and said Luther was a genius, okay, but seeing him compose and conduct, you think of it yourself, and he doesn't have to say it because
Yeah.
it's just there right in front of you.
Yeah.
And he's that film, you know, a lot of my films are not cheery, you know,
It's heavy subject
it can be
matter.
heavy subjects. I
Yeah.
think they're all emotional, but I was really needing some light. And Luther, one of the things I just loved, like we all loved making that film so much, is he's so funny. You see, I'm talking about him in the present tense because for us, he really was
Yeah.
present.
Yeah.
We were really listening to what he wanted people to know. And so if you knew his music, you appreciated him more. If you didn't know it, you could appreciate and go find him. And that was like that's the joy of film. And it's also I was a political science philosophy person, but I really love history. And like to me, that's also part of our history is how do so many people come to love an artist? What is the secret sauce magic that
Yeah.
is to people? And the joy. And people watch that movie and they all would sing during the screenings together.
I
And so
love
the
that.
feeling is it's like a concert film,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
because you go along and you're like, oh, and just like you said, and that.
Literally, you're like, what? Every song I love ever. And also like the idea, I mean, I'm sure people who are more steeped in music history like knew about his relationship artistically with David Bowie. But there were just so many like incredible you gave us such access not just to the headline like David Bowie thought Luther Vandross was amazing, but how they work together. Also like every jingle from many people's childhood, you're like, what? Fruit Loops? Like let it be Lowenbrow? Like what? It's just and then just the idea of someone starting in a certain like socioeconomic experience being able through sheer willpower and talent and luck and magic that has to happen, just bringing his whole family into a whole new way of living, who also, he says in that film very much like what you talk about with your mom, he he had no idea if he was rich or poor growing up. He just had everything he needed. And it hits when he says that in such a beautiful way. Just this idea of if you feel safe and loved and nurtured and you're not physically starving, which he wasn't. Um, anyway, it's just so beautiful. And I really appreciated it because I don't know that I would have gone on to in like a deep dive about Luther Vandross necessarily, but so much opened up in me just watching that film in all the ways you expressed about why you wanted to make it. Um, do you know what your next project is? Can you talk about it?
We have a few different things going on. So in about 2 weeks, we're premiering a new film at Sundance. It's called When a Witness Recants. It's a film for HBO. It is about three young men who were wrongfully accused and convicted of murdering their friend and spent more than 3 decades in prison until they were exonerated. And the police manipulated the other children who were friends of theirs to testify falsely against them. So that was a very challenging film because they were in jail for 36 years. We didn't
Oh
have
my goodness.
pictures, we didn't have footage. So I worked for the first time with a graphic novel artist, and he created these beautiful drawings of them. And so that was creatively some new territory for me, and that was
Yeah.
really great. I would love to do more collaborations with graphic artists. So that's premiering. I'm super proud of that. The guys are all coming to Sundance to see their movie with an audience, which is just, um, it really is like that's the best part is when people, I've had subjects say, I feel seen. And like for people who were so unjustly treated for so many years, to give them the chance to be seen and respected is very, very meaningful to me. And then working on a film about Winnie and Nelson Mandela, emphasis on Winnie, because we don't talk about the women, next to the men. And I really enjoyed making the film called Ladybird Diaries about Ladybird Johnson. And it just really got me thinking about these women who are
Right.
powerhouses and what is their story and why don't we tell
Yeah.
it? And then coming out sometime this spring is a film about Pat Summitt, the coach of the Tennessee Lady Vols. And so Pat Summitt died early from complications of dementia. But before she died, she was the winningest coach in college history, basketball, male or female. So, once again, if you know, you know, but if you don't know, people will, a lot more people. So that's going to be on Hulu, um, and probably ESPN as well. So
Dawn,
I know.
you are the most unbelievably prolific human being. It is astonishing.
I have great collaborators. So each of these
Wow.
films takes nobody makes a film by themselves. Like I don't care what woozits or wasits you have.
I
You,
love Wizits and Wazits. Those are my favorite helpers. Yes.
and I tend to work with the same people, largely women, producers who, we have the same approach, which is story first, person first. What don't people know? How can we have the person tell their own story, really inhabit these films in a way that, really expresses some truths about them, truths that are not always positive. I mean, Winnie Mandela did a lot of terrible things. She also did a lot of unbelievable things.
Right.
But she was imprisoned in solitary confinement for more than a year. People don't know that. She was tortured. Her children were taken multiple times
Mm.
can you imagine as a mother, someone grabs your kid, doesn't, takes you to jail and you don't know where your child is? A lot of terrible things happen. So, I think about that. I'm like, it's like the Wicked story. Like Elphaba was made, she wasn't born.
Right.
And
Right.
I think it's very similar for Winnie. That is not to excuse the violence that she participated in,
Right.
but I think we
But
need to
to give
understand.
us more context of her holistically as a human, I think about, someone will say, should I watch that? Is it too intense? And I think, you'll be talking about something and they'll be like, wow, that sounds really heavy in a heavy world. I think about all of the like dark places you have gone to that show the very worst about humankind, and then like the tremendous inspiring revelations that come along when you unearth facts that free people, literally free people. But I do wonder, how do you like, how do like I think about those public defenders and the stories they live with, right? Trying to help people in often a system that not only doesn't care, wants it to stay the same. Um, what do you do for you? Like, how do you hang on, because you are the most beloved friend. Everyone I told that you were coming on the show is like, not only is she like brilliant, she's warm and funny and all the things that you wouldn't always use to describe like a super serious person, which you are. You are like a hilarious intellectual. Like you are all these things. So how do you protect that in you?
I have really great friends. I spend summers now in Martha's Vineyard, in this creative community that is also literally soul filling. A lot of collaborations have come out of that experience, but I'm almost 60 now, and I really value peace and my family and my friends. And so it's not easy. I mean, making Gideon's Army, there's a line in it where Jonathan Rapping, who's the creator of the training program that all the kids are in, he's their mentor. And he says to one of the public defenders, if you're going to save people from hell, you do have to go to hell to do it. And
Right.
so I feel like that's, if you are gonna help people out of these terrible situations, you have to see them clearly. So it does come with the job, but what is more obvious to me, even in these dark times, is there's always light. I mean, it is unbelievable. You will always find someone who is helping and succeeding. And so I'm not afraid to look at those dark things anymore, because there's usually right next to it, the light is stronger.
Mm.
And so but in the summer, I love going to the beach. I play a lot of tennis. I really spend like, the thing about Martha's Vineyard is we go to each other's houses and sit in the backyard. Like, that's what the fun is. It's not
Yeah.
fancy, like, I don't even have any high heels there. I don't have any nice outfits. Like, your hair is slicked back and you're just spending time with people. One of the most important collaborations with this artist named John Forte, and he's a brilliant composer, plays with the Fugees. Um, he has done compositions. We did a series, Eyes on the Prize, the civil rights series. We did the third installment. John did all the music, um, and in his basement rearranged the Eyes on the Prize theme song, cast a young girl from the island who was 12 to sing it in a duet with an elder. And then we went to New Orleans and recorded that song in a church with a choir. Like, these are the people there. And he was like, we need the spirit of the ancestors to infuse this film. And so being around people like that who challenge you artistically, and it's just like that's what it is. Like, I have really good friends who show me every single day what brilliance and beauty and kindness is, and they are really, really helpful.
All right. Well, before I let you go to make the next great film that will have impact forever, and your legacy is already so clear, um, can you share a little known fact about Dawn Porter with my listeners?
Let's see, little known fact. There's so many little known facts. Okay, I'm a big fan of The Sound of Music.
Okay.
um I grew up singing Carly Simon and Carole King's Tapestry. I love those songs. I am a philosophy nerd. I wrote my senior college thesis on whether women in Plato's Republic could be philosopher kings. Um, what else? That's probably enough.
You don't, I mean, honey, you had me at Sound of Music. I mean, the rest are just bonus little known facts. Dawn Porter, just as a human on planet Earth, may I thank you. Part of why this podcast gives me so much joy is not only getting to spend time with extraordinary human beings like you, but getting to say thank you to them directly. So this episode is just a fan letter to you and the beautiful, beautiful work you put out into the world and the way in which you help change our perspectives about so many things we thought we knew and understand. So thank you. Thank you for your art and your activism and your humanity. I'm so grateful you came on the show today, truly.
Thank you. That was really a marvelous interview. I really, really enjoyed speaking with
Oh, I'm so glad. All right. Well, I can't wait to see you this summer. I will be in a backyard with you in my flip-flops, and I can't wait.
you.
Have the
Take care.
best day. Bye, Dawn. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.